I'm now in charge of everything veteran recruiting and retention at UPS. We have over 19,000 veterans that work at UPS, making us one of the largest veteran employers in the world.
Wow.
So my job is to grow that through new initiatives, partnerships, and programs. So absolutely loving that work. It kind of blends what I do with this podcast, with what I do with night work, what I do at Emory University, what I do with Vetlanta. So absolutely loving this role.
Welcome to the Tango Tango podcast. Real, raw, and unfiltered conversations with veterans and those who support them. Tune in, be inspired, and walk away stronger.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Scott Luton and the one and only Lloyd Knight with you here on the all-new Tango Tango podcast, which is proudly sponsored by our friends here at Supply Chain Now. Welcome, folks, to today's show. Lloyd, how are you doing today?
You know, it's a gorgeous early Thursday morning in Atlanta. Beautiful weather, but way too much pine tree pollen.
Well, true that. And what I thought you were going to say is so muggy. We've lost the briskness of early spring, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Well, what we haven't lost is a wonderful, wonderful new announcement, new venture, new stories. Folks, you're in for a wonderful show here today. So now, to all of our Veteran Voices listeners, folks, you aren't in the wrong place. In just a moment, we're going to be explaining how and why Veteran Voices is transforming into Tango Tango. Because the mission to serve our veterans, me and Lloyd and the whole team's behind us, it hasn't changed. It's simply entering a new chapter, and we're conducting a bit of a change of command, aren't we, Lloyd?
We are. A good change of command.
Good change of command, you know, and that's fully respecting all the previous commanders, all future commanders. You know, it goes part and parcel with our military experience. So today we're also going to be introducing you to a fellow veteran, a dynamo, folks, Lloyd Knight right here, whom I bet some of our audience members know. You're going to learn a lot more about his distinguished journey from the United States Air Force to corporate America, to Vetlanta, to Mars and beyond. I'm telling y'all, we're also going to be discussing a few critical topics that are really important priorities right now for our veteran community, as well as a sneak peek of the big shows coming up right here on Tango Tango. And we're going to get to all of that on the very first edition of this new podcast series. So, Lloyd, we got a lot of work. I hope you brought your work boots on because we got a lot of work to do today.
Got my caffeine.
Me and you both. All right. Mine's good old Costco brand. How about you? Did you one-up me with like Black Rifle Coffee Company or something?
No, I'm drinking tea these days. I'm doing the British thing. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna have to dive more into that, Lloyd. I tell you, Renaissance man from every time I meet you.
Yeah, right. That's me.
Folks, stay tuned for informative, enlightening, entertaining conversation, and I can't be more excited about building on the legacy that Veteran Voices and the service that Veteran Voices has delivered and entering into a bold, new, exciting chapter. So, all right. So up first, let's do this, Lloyd. I think we've got to really focus in on how we got here and really examine history, right? Because we learned so much from history. Would you agree?
History is one of my favorite subjects, and Scott and I definitely have history, and it's a great history of this program.
Undoubtedly. Lloyd, I was going through some old pictures, and there was a day where you and I and about 30 volunteers were cleaning out the basement of a local veteran nonprofit. And I'm going to tell you, we should have taken the pictures before we did the work, but we took the pictures at the end of a very full Saturday. Do you remember that?
It was some nasty work. It was me, Amanda, my late wife Suzanne, and that was some nasty work. But you should see the facility that's sitting on that space now.
Oh, I tell you,
it's amazing.
That might be a future show too. But folks, me and Lloyd do have a ton of history, and I'm so excited to build on this. But let's take a look at the history first, though. Now we launched Veteran Voices years ago as part of the Supply Chain Now ecosystem because we wanted to create a distinctive, unique, and dedicated series that truly amplified veteran voices, experiences, transitions, accomplishments, challenges, and issues, all of that and a whole bunch more, hopefully in a manner that informed and helped others navigate through their own chapters in their journey. From the very first episode, Lloyd, I almost remember every single episode, but from the very first, Lloyd Knight and many members of the Vetlanta organization that he co-founded, well, they were some of our biggest supporters. Had some great conversations. In fact, if you go back to those early episodes, you're going to see Lloyd Knight grinning and hosting a lot of those conversations. So then from that early era, we then transitioned, and our longtime listeners their brain probably is going back through all these previous chapters, right? So if you go back to those early ones, it's Lloyd and me and a bunch of the recurring co-hosts. And then we transitioned it to where I was solo hosting for a lot of the conversations. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I wanted to provide another host with the opportunity to not only shape the conversations, but select the guests, run the show, really apply their vision to veteran voices. So Army veteran and now PhD, Lloyd, Dr. Mary Kate Saliva. How about that?
Congratulations, Mary Kate. That's absolutely amazing. I have no idea how you found the time to podcast and do everything else.
I'm with you. That makes two of us. And I'll tell you, I am still the co-chairman of the Atlanta chapter of the Dr. Mary Kate Saliva fan club. But anyway, so Mary Kate joined the Veteran Voices family, and she led several seasons of incredible shows. I'll tell you, I still admire, but seeing her at work, leading all those conversations, her passion, her energy, her dedication to creating wonderful content. So, seasons of life, come and go. They provide opportunities for us all to enter new chapters. Mary Kate co-founded an extraordinary nonprofit, and that nonprofit and that whole venture really needed your time, attention, and focus. And I can't wait to see where that venture grows and all the mountains that it'll move. It currently is moving, and a whole bunch more. Well, I bet, Lloyd, my hunch is we'll have Mary Kate back in the saddle at some point as a special guest down the road. But we'll see. I'd love to get all caught up with her.
That would be fabulous. But I got to talk a little bit more about history.
Yes,
so
please.
Our early days, we would meet at third-party sites, and Scott would come rolling in with his little wagon and it was
a red hand truck,
and that. It was amazing. And then it blew us away because nobody else was doing this. It was visionary. This is before, the virtual. It's been that long ago. This is before the virtual.
So true.
And then he had an amazing studio at the King Plow Art Center, which I definitely did a lot of episodes down there, and it was always interesting trying to beat the traffic all the way up from Alpharetta or coming to get down there. And we had some great, amazing guests.
Yes.
I think my favorite, David Bellavia, the Medal of Honor recipient, who was so gracious with his time and such an amazing guest. So maybe we can get David back on the show as well.
I'll tell you, speaking of Mr. Bellavia, that Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, it seemed like his appearance on Veteran Voices then kind of kicked off a slew. I mean, he's been speaking and keynoting everywhere since then, which I'm glad. I mean, all of our war heroes and especially Medal of Honor recipients should get a whole bunch of visibility, and folks should listen to their experiences, huh?
Absolutely. And David is one of the most humble guys you would meet as well.
Yeah, very true. Very true. All right. So all of that, loving on our previous guests, loving on the team that got us to this point, and that's going to get us into the next chapter, loving on Dr. Mary Kate Saliva. I tell you, I admire her and Lloyd. And I'm so excited to be able to collaborate with leaders like them both. So then, Lloyd, now that we've kind of looked back, so not too long ago, me and Lloyd were sitting down, catching up over a great lunch. A lunch where I ate way too much because I felt like taking a nap all afternoon. But it dawned on us, both of us, that we had a terrific opportunity here, And all of that conversation and several conversations that followed led us to work together to relaunch a new version of Veteran Voices and truly embrace a bold new vision that Lloyd Knight brought to the table, leveraging many things, but especially his impeccable track record of passionately serving not only our veteran community, but of course our country as well. So with that, Lloyd, the Tango Tango podcast was born, which our Supply Chain Now team, big shout out to all the folks there. We're very proud to help launch it and sponsor it and grow it and continue to serve as we move forward. So Lloyd, with all of that, two-part question for you. Anything else? And don't be picking on my red hand truck and all those bungee cords that I used to weigh all that stuff down. But anything else about the history you want to mention? And you got to let us know where the name of the podcast series came from.
So first is it was born in Joey D's, and I think I had a big Reuben sandwich, so I ate way too much as well. And so we need to get Joey D's to be a sponsor.
That's
for the
right.
show, because me and you have definitely spent a lot of money at Joey D's over the years. So when I was looking, I have another podcast that I do for my day gig, UPS, called The Landing Zone. The hardest thing to do is pick a name for anything. I remember it took us like 3 months to name Vetlanta, which you'll hear a little bit about Vetlanta. The Landing Zone was a stroke of genius. And I wanted something kind of as novel. And really, the theme of these shows are honest conversations. And I was thinking the most honest conversations I've ever had is when I was a first sergeant in the Air Force. So you see that one diamond, a shadow box behind me. That's the symbol of the Air Force first sergeants. And I was like, I want it to be, honest conversations with the retired first sergeants. So I started looking at different names, and one of the first sergeants have a bunch of nicknames.
Yeah.
In the Air Force and some of the other branches of service, they call them Shirt, but the Army and Marines, they use Top. And so I was like, oh, Top Talks would be amazing. So went in there and there's already a Top Talks podcast.
Shout out to them.
I didn't want to duplicate anything. So I hey, let's just use the alphanumeric and call it Tango Tango. And that's how the podcast was born. And then really some creativity on your team to come up with an amazing logo.
Very appreciative of our talented team now, Amanda and Joshua and Trisha and so many others that help make all of this happen. But Lloyd, for context, because we may have some listeners or some viewers that maybe they're big veteran advocates and they didn't serve, so they didn't have an opportunity to work with or be counseled by or whatever a first sergeant. And briefly, would you tell us what a first sergeant does?
Yeah, and I'm going to take it from the Air Force's point of view, because I'm retired Air Force, and each of the branches is a little bit different.
Yep.
So in the Air Force, you're the commander's right-hand enlisted leader responsible for morale, welfare, and discipline of the workforce. And the Air Force, as a first sergeant, you're not involved in operations whatsoever. I was a career aviator for 17 years, flying on cargo planes. And as a first sergeant, I was a first sergeant first for a hospital, which I didn't know anything about running a hospital. And then the second was for a communications squad. But I was totally focused on the people. If somebody's in trouble, you're handling the discipline. You try to spend most of your time in morale, making sure morale is great. And then welfare, if somebody's spouse or if you have a troop giving a baby, it's a lot of times you're in the hospital putting the cigars in mouths. Unfortunately, if there's a death notification, especially if you're deployed, you're usually the one working with the American Red Cross and making that happen. You're making sure the workforce is fit and shape and ready to deploy and they take the fight to our enemies.
I tell you, that is, I'm not sure if I've ever sat down with a first sergeant and asked them what they did. And just how you responded in the last couple of minutes really opened my eyes to some things I had no idea that the first shirt handled. But this is a great segue now that you've kind of shared, because folks, your fearless leader is going to be the one and only Lloyd Knight as we move forward in this exciting new Tango Tango podcast series. So we got to get to know our fearless leader better, because I've had the opportunity to know Lloyd a long time, but I want all of our audience members that have been with us through all the previous chapters and will be with us through the new chapters of where we're going. I want y'all to get to know Lloyd Knight too. So, Lloyd, you just described a lot of what you did as a first sergeant, but in a broader sense, tell us more about your overall military career in the United States Air Force.
Yeah, I joined the Air Force when I was 17. Went to basic training 3 days after graduation.
Wow.
Of high school. I was a terrible high school student, which is crazy. I would never think I would have all those degrees that are over here now. If it wasn't for my late wife, I would have still graduated, but maybe should have been a year later. And, she really helped me out. But I joined the Air Force and wanted to fly. So I became an enlisted aviator, a loadmaster on cargo planes. So yeah, you'll see a couple C-141s right over my shoulder, the Starlifter. So I was a C-141 Starlifter loadmaster. Never knew how tough that school was going to be. So you got through basic training, and then I had basic loadmaster school, then survival school, water survival, C-141 flight school, and then airdrop school.
How long were you in school?
So the schools were about 6 months, but really I spent the first about a year and 3 months in training.
Wow.
And so it was quite significant training. A loadmaster has a lot of responsibility. So in my basic loadmaster school, we had about 30 people in class, and every day we would lose somebody. I had to quickly develop study habits, and I had to learn discipline. I spent a lot of late nights studying the 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. Luckily I was pretty good at math because there was a lot of math, but not great on memorization.
Well, so Lloyd, for context for folks that may be new to the term and the role that loadmasters play and why there's so much math and all that training, I mean, loadmasters play a critical role, especially as we move cargo and have the planes ready to go and fulfill the mission. Tell us more about what loadmasters do.
Sure. On the C-141 Starlifter, you would have a pilot, co-pilots, 2 flight engineers, and 1 or 2 loadmasters. So the flight engineers and pilots, as you come up into the airplane, they're responsible for everything to the left. So the flight deck, the old name cockpit, loadmaster is responsible for everything to the right. And so I was responsible for ensuring the cargo was loaded correctly, that it was tied down correctly. Believe it or not, there's a lot of math that goes into tying down the equipment, because you have to tie it down for different G forces. And then you have to calculate what restraints each of those straps or chains is giving you. You have to ensure that the hazardous cargo is separated and compatible. You keep your eye on the passengers, but the big thing is you balance the airplane. So you have to balance the airplane itself, all the people, all the supplies, and all the cargo. And believe it or not, it's got a really small balance point in the middle of it. So if you could think, if you hold an airplane up like this and you put the fulcrum in the middle, you got to balance it. And so if you put a lot of cargo on the back, it's going to do this.
Right.
Well, guess what? If it's doing this, it's not going to fly. It's not going to take off. It's not going to land. It's not going to cruise. If you're lucky enough to get in the air, it's going to burn a lot more fuel. So you have to totally balance the airplane. And they set the stabilizer settings and the trim of the airplane on the percentage of the mean aerodynamic chord. And that's what you're figuring out, where the airplane's balanced at. And then when you get in the airdrop, you're responsible for ensuring everything is loaded correctly. All the systems are work. You help the paratroopers leave the airplane. And then you ensure heavy equipment airdrops, which is probably the hardest thing we do other than special operations. You ensure that exits the airplane correctly as well.
Oh, fascinating. I can see you doing all of that, including using the abacus to check out the map. What else? When it comes to your military career, I mean, really, to do it justice, we would need a 20 episode series in and of itself. But what else would you want to share with the audience here about your military career?
Well, I had a very interesting career. I only flew operationally in an operational unit for 3 years, and then I was blessed to go into flight test. So I spent 8 years in flight test, 3 at Wright-Patterson, flying cargo aircraft that would test different equipment out. And then after that 3 years, I went to Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert. So if you ever watch a spatial land,
Yes.
yeah, it was normally landing in the Mojave Desert at Edwards.
Very cool.
That's where the home of the Air Force Flight Test Center. That's where the Air Force and has done flight testing from the very beginning. And they, when the first astronauts trained, they trained at Edwards Air Force Base. So it was pretty remarkable. Every day was like an air show. I got to fly, and in fact, I got to fly 2 air shows in the same formation as Chuck Yeager,
Wow.
who was one of my heroes, because they still let him fly. And even though he was retired and elderly, he started our air show every year, breaking the sound barrier in an F-16.
Really?
So so I got to meet him multiple times, which was very cool. And then from there, I got re-blued, as I call it. I went into a ground unit. We called them Tanker Airlift Control Center elements. So I moved to Germany with the family, and I spent 4 years traveling all over the Middle East and Africa. So they would send our teams anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months in the locations that civilian airports or maybe it was a foreign airfield. And anytime there was a contingency or a humanitarian, for example, I ended up going to South Africa for 5 weeks during the Mozambique flood.
Wow.
And so that was really neat, because in that assignment, I figured out, hey, that cargo in the back of the airplane, that stuff matters. I mean, it's important. And then from there, I went to Headquarters Air Mobility Command and served as a functional manager for 3 years. And even in these assignments, I'm still flying, but flying is not my primary job. So I had a great 3 years at Headquarters Air Mobility Command. And then I decided to become a first sergeant. My brother was a first sergeant in the Air Force, and I would do it part-time, and kind of got the bug. It's all about people, and I'm a people person.
You absolutely are.
And so I really like that, and fought the Air Force long and hard to become a first sergeant, because they were not letting aviators take on that role. And I won and got to do it for 3 years, which was pretty remarkable. I use that first sergeant's experience now more than all those degrees I have.
Interesting.
More than all the 17 years of logistics and transportation experience, because it's all about managing people.
Yeah. As much as I love that, I find that 17 years of doing military supply chain basically fascinating too. I really wish I had been a loadmaster after hearing you that again. And I think I told you that before, Lloyd. That has got to be one of the coolest jobs in the whole world. One quick follow-up. You use the term re-blued. Now, I'm assuming at that phase in your career, that kind of went from a role where you're BDUs every day, kind of hands-on, flight line or whatever, to being in maybe more external facing roles where it was a bit more formal. But what's your definition when you say re-blued?
Yeah, so I was spoiled. So 8 years of flight tests. So never were BDUs. I was in a flight suit the entire time. And there was not many enlisted aviators. We were really focused on our own thing, honestly, doing flight tests. And so we went to a lot of non-military bases, and really was quite spoiled. And then that was about 10 years into my career. I mean, think about it, 12 years into my career. I took the assignment to Germany. I bought BDUs for the first time and really got core, like, hey, I'm now deploying again and seeing the Air Force accomplish its overall mission.
Gotcha.
And then and now I'm working with all the other branches of service again. So it was an amazing assignment. It served me well. And one of the things it did was like, hey, I got to get off my butt and get promoted. Because I was always the junior guy. If you look over my shoulder, there's a little thing that says junior nameplates.
Yeah.
That ended up being my nickname. I was 8 years in flight tests, because I was the youngest guy by about 10 years. I was the lowest ranking person for my entire, can you imagine that? The youngest ranking guy for 8 years, and the lowest ranking. And then I got back into the normal Air Force, and I ended up making a E6 and E7 pretty quickly.
It's funny what you relearn with folks you think you know for so long, given all the stories and all the conversations we had. I've got a much different appreciation for what you did in the Air Force and those different phases and chapters of your service too. So we're going to have to dive more into that. As I think about what our audience should know about you now that they have a pretty good working definition of at least of what you did at a higher level in the United States Air Force and retired you retired at what, 20 years?
Yeah, I had I was doing really well. I was still in love with the Air Force when I retired. I missed E8 by a third of a point.
Oh,
I actually went to the Senior NCO Academy and came out of the Senior NCO Academy going, I think I want to retire. So I decided at the 19-year mark to retire. I put my paperwork in, and then a year later, I served 20 years in 3 days. And
wow.
I was going to get promoted again that next year, but was ready to use all those degrees I had earned and try my hand in corporate America. And frankly, I was ready to give my family some stability. My oldest son went to 3 high schools in 3 different states.
Oh gosh.
And I was facing another move, and then my airplane was retired, and so I was going back into the airplane. So you remember that year I talked about in training? I was getting ready to face that again. And for most of my time as an aviator, I spent between 100 and 220 days a year on the road.
Oh gosh.
So I was ready to put some of that behind me.
Lloyd, that just for the millionth time, at least for me, and I bet for many of our listeners or viewers, puts in perspective how families serve. Individuals absolutely serve, but Lloyd, your whole family served with you, given all of that. And we gotta find better and better ways to make sure we take care of those families that serve and give so much to our country and what we do around the world. So, all right. So at 20 years and 3 days, wow. I'm going to dive back into night work, which we're going to talk about in a second, folks. But let's talk about your transition and your really successful corporate career, and including your time at UPS.
Yeah, I had a great transition because since I decided to retire at 19 years, I had a whole year to work on it. It was much different back then. This is back in 2006 going into 2007. There wasn't a whole lot of resources like there are today. There's tons of nonprofits today. There's a better TAP program. There's everything to help you. Well, there wasn't a whole lot for me, but I was able to go find it and had a lot of interviews, had a lot of success. Decided to take the offer at UPS. One, I wanted to live in the South, and they're headquartered in Atlanta. I actually took a pay cut at the time, leaving the Air Force, but very arrogantly thought, of course, I'm going to get promoted. And so I actually retired, had my retirement ceremony on a Friday, moved to Atlanta that Saturday, and started with UPS on Monday.
Wow.
I landed into a great position, Scott. So I got hired to do government tenders. So for our freight forwarding business unit, I didn't know what freight forwarding was. I had no idea what tenders were. And frankly, the guy who hired me was decent in some of this, but he didn't know a whole lot about the government business over here. So we were really underwhelming the government business. And I came in, and for the first 6 months, that's all I did. And honestly, I got really good at it, and it was only taking me like an hour a day. And I quickly figured out, geez, I better do something else, right? So I started swimming outside of my lane and making decisions. And luckily, I made more good decisions than bad.
Okay.
And then, my boss had left. So I ended up getting promoted 3 times in my first 5 years up to the director level. And the next thing I know, I'm in charge of global government operations at UPS, moving big things, not small. For example, my group moved over 5,000 armored vehicles to and from Afghanistan.
Wow.
I never went to Afghanistan in the Air Force, which is kills me because I've been to 75 countries. I went twice with UPS.
Huh.
So it was a pretty glorious job. It kept me really busy. We were supporting the war efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan. We were actually running armed convoys they were armed by the local protection force in Fallujah and Ramadi. Wow. And delivering APs products. So if you were in Fallujah or Ramadi during the war and you got tobacco, if you got I always screw this up, an iPod, not an iPod.
Right.
An iPod, if you got CDs, DVDs, video games, all that came via UPS.
Interesting.
They shipped here out of Atlanta at the old Port Gillum distribution center and shipped all the way to Fallujah to Ramadi via UPS.
That is remarkable, Lloyd. One more thing that you touched on earlier in your response was kind of maybe the vernacular differences from the government side of a government supply chain, I'll call it military supply chain, and the civilian side. It sounds like you were a critical bridge in that helped enable UPS to better understand and do it better. Lloyd, is that accurate? Or what thoughts do you have about those differences?
That's absolutely accurate. I mean, I ended up creating an initiative called Military 101 to train all our salespeople, because not one of our salesperson at the time had served in the military. And so they needed to know the rank structure, the differences between the services. They needed to know the missions, basis they would deal with. The locations of our forward operating bases in Iraq and Afghanistan, terminology. So that really kind of launched some of my success. And the next thing was we started a standalone quote desk for the government business.
Okay.
When UPS had actually purchased several companies, and when we purchased the one that was doing pretty good government business, they took its government call center, closed it down and moved it into the commercial call center. And it just didn't work. We weren't very good at it. We couldn't turn a quote. We didn't have good pricing. We couldn't do the extreme coordination that was involved. When you run a call center, it's all about metrics, right? How quick can you get off the call?
Sure.
Well, with the military business, especially the war zone, it's quite complicated. You might be on the call for 2 hours to move a 500-pound shipment, right? But that's what it takes. And then you have to know all the terminology and everything I just described. So they let me start. I got to hire 2 people and start that call center. I remember waiting for the phone to ring for the first time because we didn't advertise it. It was scary. I was like, I'm going to get fired if this phone doesn't ring. And then we were successful, and word started spreading by word of mouth. I think we won $400,000 the first year, which was maybe 4 times more than they had done without that center. And then by year 2, we were $1 million. By year 5, we were $10 million.
Wow. That's remarkable. I can only imagine, having been around call centers at different parts of my career and how they're managed. There's a lot of Six Sigma methodologies applied to call centers, right? To streamline them and
you got to throw all that out the window with the, I had somebody come see me, a vice president, and she came up with her SOP because she was running the big commercial call center. They were closing very low percentage of quotes. I was closing 65%, winning 65%. She goes, I got to know how you do it. So let's go through the SOP. And, typical first sergeant candor, I said, can I see that? And she goes, yeah. So I said, you want to know how I did it? And she goes, absolutely. I threw the book away.
Well, that's kind of the point I was making. I mean, different types of business, different types of conversations. And clearly, I love what you added from background awareness to changing the whole process, setting aside endorsed corporate standard operating procedures because it just didn't apply to what you were building. And the best part about it all are the results, because all this wouldn't be a great story if you didn't, by year 5, take a scratch, brand new venture and make it a $10 million part of the overall, revenue pie.
Here's some more cool news, Scott. So I've been out of that business for about 5 years now.
Okay.
I moved on to other opportunities at UPS, which we'll talk a little bit about. But that group is still there.
Really?
It's still thriving even after all that war business went away. Because it's super appreciated. Even with all the cuts we've done, that group has remained in its whole. So I'm really proud I created something from the scratch that's continuing now 17 years after I started it.
Wow. That is remarkable. All right. So what else should folks understand and especially for context about your corporate career that you want to share?
Yeah. So one of the big ones is my veteran engagement. So for my first 4 years, I focused on doing the job. I was super busy and ended up getting a master's degree that time. I was traveling the world. I was traveling a lot again. Unfortunately, my late wife used to say, I think you need to go back to flying because I saw you more. So I was super busy, but really focused on that. As things started to slow down a little bit, I wanted to start giving back to the veteran community. And so I ended up starting the very first Veterans Business Resource Group at UPS. That was 13 years ago. And a Veterans Business Resource Group is a group of volunteer employees that focus on both internal and external engagements. So internal, it would be like helping HR and talent acquisition with hiring, mentorship programs, new veteran employee welcome, and then external is normally volunteering. So ran that for 2 years, which would lead into Vetlanta, which we can talk about later. Went out on special assignment to start our very first veterans management training program. That was a 6-month assignment with HR. Was always engaged for many, many years. Won the Jim Casey Community Service Award at UPS, which is our highest award, given that it just one of 500,000 of our employees each year, due to my volunteerism in the veteran world. And did anytime they asked, I did it, but I couldn't turn it into a job, and which was like really, really frustrating. And because I wanted to do this as a full time.
Yep.
And about 2 years ago, I opened up our career site and was like, holy cow, they created a new position. And so they created a veteran talent acquisition strategy position. So I'm now in charge of everything veteran recruiting and retention at UPS. We have over 19,000 veterans that work at UPS, making us one of the largest veteran employers in the world.
Wow.
So my job is to grow that through new initiatives, partnerships, and programs. So absolutely loving that work. It kind of blends what I do with this podcast, with what I do with night work, what I do at Emory University, what I do with Vetlanta. So absolutely loving this role.
Oh my gosh, what a perfect, current chapter to add on to this. It's an incredible journey you've been on, and this current role, just what you're talking about. I remember we sat down at breakfast a couple years ago, I think, and you first shared with me kind of this new leadership role you'd be taking. And we both were like, this is like if you designed a role for Lloyd Knight, knowing all of his DNA and everything he's done, this is the role that would you'd come up with. Because this like takes all your skill sets and your passions, and you're dealing with people, which, it's what you were born to do in so many different ways. So you mentioned, and I don't want to move us ahead to Vetlanta yet, but anything else you want to add about this current role and when you look back at the corporate chapter of your journey, anything else you want to share with folks?
Yeah, I just hit the 18-year mark on April 1st because I got hired on April Fool's Day. So that was my first day. It's been a great ride. It hadn't been all roses and sunshine.
Right, sure.
It's hard work. I used to say I work harder at UPS than I ever did in the military. One of the big things I always talk about is culture. I love talking about culture. And luckily for me is UPS has for largely been a good cultural fit. And so if you're a service member getting ready to make the transition, you're definitely going to look at job title and job and duties and location and benefits and pay, but don't overlook culture. Because culture is really important. If you go into an organization where the culture doesn't align with your values, you're going to be absolutely miserable regardless of the money they're paying.
Excellent.
So take a hard look at culture. If you're interested in a UPS, I'm going to give some contact info later on, and you can please feel free to reach out.
Come work for one of the largest employers and supporters of veterans across the globe. So connect with Lloyd to learn more about that. Okay, man, 20 years, 3 days with the Air Force, now celebrating 18 years with UPS. Goodness gracious, on April Fool's Day. All right, so let's talk about the other really big thing, Vetlanta, which has really provided the vehicle for you and me to meet, and countless others probably. Tell us about Vetlanta.
Yeah, Vetlanta was it's crazy how it happened. So Vetlanta was formed largely out of a meeting with John Phillips, who is now the co-founder, retired lieutenant colonel from the Army, now retired from Coca-Cola. Thought of this great idea. All these companies had started veteran business resource groups across the United States, including a lot in Atlanta. So he said at about a little over 11 years ago, let's have a meeting with all these company VBRGs and find out what everybody's doing for veterans, because he very arrogantly thought Coca-Cola was the only one doing anything. So we had that first meeting. There was probably 25, 30 people there from 15, 20 different organizations, the who's who here in Atlanta. You know, we had Coca-Cola and UPS and Delta and Georgia Tech and AT&T and
Home
GE,
Depot,
and Home Depot. So a lot of solid companies. And we were amazed. Our companies were doing big things for veterans nationally, but more important, locally. Collectively, and I don't exaggerate these numbers, we were hiring hundreds of thousands of veterans a year. Our foundations were giving millions of dollars to veteran causes, and our employees were volunteering at staggering rates to veteran initiatives. But what was missing was nobody was talking to each other. And because of nobody was talking to each other, the space was stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating. The space was very ill-informed. At the time, everybody was giving the Wounded Warrior and sticking it on their end of year report. Like Wounded Warrior now, Wounded Warrior had some big issues going on at the time. So we were like, wow, that's such a good meeting. Let's have another meeting. And that other meeting would lay the foundation of what would become Vetlanta. And that is honest and open and sometimes brutal dialogue on the good, bad, and ugly of the space. So good is an organization providing the right service at the right time for the right reasons, getting the right results. And we were blessed in Atlanta. We got some incredible organizations that do that. And then there was the bad. I put the bad in two categories. The first, there were very large organizations that do good work for veterans, but sometimes they get arrogant and too focused on their own culture. And then sometimes they're focused too much on fundraising.
Yeah.
And they're spending 90% of their time and money to raise that next dollar versus providing the service deliverable. So I consider that bad. Sometimes they listen to Vetlanta, sometimes they don't. Second category is bad is a lot of really good people start nonprofits for the right reasons. Their heart, soul, and spirit are in it for the right reasons. They just don't have the business sense or management and leadership ability to ever be successful with your donor dollar or your volunteer hour. Sometimes we can help, oftentimes they're lost causes.
Yeah.
And then there's the ugly out there. The ugly are the fraudsters, scammers, and schemers. And unfortunately, they're prevalent and they're terrible. And beside the elderly community, veterans are probably the most preyed on community in the country. And unfortunately, some of those fraudsters, scammers, and schemers, or shysters, as I call them, are fellow veterans.
Yeah.
So what we decided to do was like, hey, let's start Vetlanta. Let's form it so we can have these routine meetings. And so we can advertise the good, try to help the bad, and isolate the heck out of the ugly in a very coordinated fashion. So the ball ended up getting passed to me. I had no idea what I was doing. I none, right? But started having these early meeting breakfasts. Like our very first meeting was 6:30 in the morning at the OK Corral, which is a legendary place to have breakfast in Atlanta. And then
the OK Cafe, Lloyd.
OK Cafe. That's it. OK Cafe.
OK Corral is whiter. OK Cafe is Atlanta.
OK Cafe. It's funny. So it burnt down the next day after our first meeting.
Really?
Yeah, it's back, but
Yeah.
it burnt down. Yeah, it burnt down.
Wow.
And then I started listening to anybody I could talk to, and I didn't realize I didn't know this until years later. I ended up getting a graduate certificate from the University of Georgia, Go Dogs, in nonprofit management. Who I was talking to were my stakeholders, and so I was talking to these stakeholders all over the map and getting information. Then I sit down with Scott Bass, who's a veteran advocate. He's not a veteran. And then Kevin Horgan, who you know well, who's been on
Oh, yeah.
Veteran Voices several times. And we decided to form not as a 501c nonprofit. We formed as a chartered club. And then this is where we got revolutionary. We opened it up to anybody who wanted to help veterans. And then we chartered ourselves never to take any money or give any money. And I didn't want to take our corporate money from those good nonprofits out
Right.
there. And then I wanted to focus on collaboration and volunteerism. And then I thought at the time, we're never going to need money. There's like 25 of us. And then we started having our routinely meetings, which we called summits, each quarter. And then they started growing and growing and growing. We've had 10,000 people attend our summits over the last decade. So our biggest summit was at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, had 1,500 people there, and Governor Kemp was our keynote speaker. So it's been a labor of love. I've put a lot into it. During the heyday, I was probably putting 500 to 600 volunteer hours a year into
Wow.
it. And but now I got this incredible board that's taken a lot of the workload off of me. We're doing big things. Our mission is to make the greater Atlanta area, so the 22 counties around Atlanta, the premier community of the country for veterans and their families. So if you're in Texas, you know that San Antonio calls itself Military City USA.
Okay.
I'm rebranding Atlanta as Veteran City USA is my goal.
I love that. So folks, this is the tip of the iceberg, what Lloyd has shared about Vetlanta. It is doing some very powerful things. I want to make sure we're gonna make sure folks know how to connect with Lloyd here in a second, but I want to definitely call out vetlanta.org, right, Lloyd? Vetlanta.org. You can check out all the different stuff they're doing. And Lloyd, I want to circle back to one thing, because I love your emphasis, and I'm not surprised, because it formed the basis of a lot of conversations we've had over the years. Calling out the good, calling out the bad, and calling out the ugly, because a lot of folks try to make a quick buck once they see a movement taking place. And to your point, there's a lot of fraud out there, a ton of fraud. And as you were sharing that, Lloyd, one of the thoughts that was between my ears is, while we love the progress we've made and how corporate America and how veteran advocates and so much more, the progress we've made into better serving, better hiring, better promoting, you name it, our veteran community. However, what can't get lost in all that is we've got to get better, in my opinion, as a society. When we hear the word veteran, we can't let our guard down, because that's what, unfortunately, those shysters, I think, as you put it, Lloyd, those folks that, they call themselves a nonprofit, they're not, or they just don't, to Lloyd's point, they're not great stewards of the dollars that come in or volunteer hours. We've got to do our due diligence, because when we don't, those really good, shining nonprofits on a hill that are doing just, fulfilling noble missions and taking care of our veterans and their families and you name it, they're losing out when we let our guard down. Lloyd, would you agree with all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the, trust but verify, any of those organizations, speak to other veterans, take a look at their website. Oftentimes their website, if it doesn't feel right, if they're too focused on fundraising, I can usually look at somebody's website for about 90 seconds and tell you if they're full of crap or not. Speak to them. So that Atlanta, one of the big things we did was we would vet every organization before we let them have a table or put them on stage. So we would have early morning pancake breakfast. Sometimes we would meet with two separate. It's crazy. We would go to the original Pancake House, meet with a group of people from 6 to 6:45, like 3 groups, And then from 6:45 to 7:30, we would meet with 3 other groups, and we would vet these groups, and I would ask them questions. And normally I could tell you within 3 questions. One of my questions is like, what do you exactly do?
I mean, saw lots of smoke screens there.
Yeah. So, and then, so oftentimes I'll get like, no, what do you exactly do? And then I'm Scott, oh my gosh, for all those breakfasts, I gained 40 pounds, but the viral stuff I saw, I should have wrote it all down and wrote another book about it. So do your homework. Charity Navigator is a great place to work. Reach out to me.
Yep.
I have a half dozen congressional offices here in Georgia on speed dial, because if they have somebody come into the office, they reach out to me to get my take.
So Lloyd mentioned Charity Navigator. Folks, that is a great vetting site, charitynavigator.org. If you're ever having a conversation and you need more information, that's a great place to start. charitynavigator.org. They rate all sorts of nonprofits based on the financials that nonprofits and other things that have to be filed. All right. So Vetlanta.org also. Lloyd, as we wrap this segment, before we talk about a couple of other things before we wrap here today, we focused a lot of getting to know Lloyd on all of the work and the volunteer leadership, but in a given weekend, and I bet you don't have many of these where you get your own, whatever Lloyd Knight wants to do from Friday at 5 p.m. till Monday, 8 a.m. But let's say you had one. What hobbies or passions, where would you spend that time?
So I got remarried, as you know, a year ago, which God blessed me with a second amazing wife. We do a lot of, we like to travel, kayak, hike, pickleball. We're getting into camping. My going joke is she kicks my butt at pickleball, so I'm not sure if this is going to last. And then, there's always something going on in the veteran space as well. I started my own business April 19th. I have a virtual workshop. I teach career readiness at Emory University for their MVV program. So occasionally that's on a Saturday. But if it's a warm day, we're kayaking or hiking, bike riding, doing something outdoors.
Love it. We're going to get pictures. Got to get pictures of you getting beaten at pickleball game, Lloyd. All right. All right, man, there's so much more, but folks, you're going to get to know Lloyd. We want to kind of start off as we kick off this new Tango Tango podcast series for especially folks that have missed Lloyd's previous appearances. We want to give you a chance to really get to know the fearless leader that's going to be taking this podcast in an exciting new direction. So, but you'll learn a lot more about Lloyd in the coming episodes and some incredible guests. So, Lloyd, there's so many more, but if you had to pick 3 topics that you're most passionate about and 3 topics that Tango Tango listeners can expect to learn a lot more about in upcoming episodes and seasons, what would those 3 topics be in terms of veteran-related topics?
Yeah, so the first one is employment. I've always been passionate about employment. It's even before I got into the talent acquisition role. So my favorite thing is getting a call or a text message or an email going, Lloyd, you helped me land my next career. And so that drives me. And that's why this is such a great fit for the position I'm in. Second is community. Unfortunately, we have over 22 veterans that kill themselves each day, which is just sad. So oftentimes it's community related. They no longer have their tribe. So that's what Vetlanta has done, is they built a community. So absolutely something that was missing for me as well. I was extremely successful, as you heard, but there was always something missing. And it was my fellow brothers and sisters in the veteran community, which have been there for me in a big way. And then the third one was we mentioned is vetting those nonprofits. So coming up in the seasons to follow, you're definitely going to hear from some nonprofits. I got Hire Heroes USA, Ross Dickman, who's going to come on and talk a little bit about they're one of my favorite nonprofits. You got Steve Prince, who's going to talk about Warrior Set Free. So we will talk about some nonprofits, but what you're going to see is amazing guests that come on. and we're going to go Joe Rogan style, and we're going to let him. I'm really not looking at a topic. I'm looking at people, because there's amazing people stories. And can I talk about it? Some of our early episodes that
I would love that. You read my brain. That's where we're going next. Tell us more.
So one of the first ones is a good friend, John Thompson. John works at Cox. He's a director of risk management. We go to church together. John Thompson was the commander of the Night Stalker units. So that's the unit that provides air assets for special forces during the Bin Laden raid.
Wow.
So we walked through his entire career, fascinating career. But then we talk about the moment he got invited to McRaven's house to tell him they found Bin Laden, all the way up to disposing of the body.
Wow.
So it's wow. I was just moved. It's powerful. Another one we have is General John Handy. John Handy was the Air Mobility Command and the Transcom Commander at Scott Air Force Base when I was there. He was the 4-star. And then he worked as an advisor for UPS for a couple of years. So I got to know him in 2 different hats and reached out to him, and not sure if he was going to do it, because he keeps a very low profile. There's no podcast, no interviews, no articles. Really, he doesn't have an updated bio anywhere. And I reached out to him, and in the conversation, I mentioned this, and I said, I'm honored that you did this, because you're not doing it. And he goes, I'm only doing it because of you, because of the relationship we have. So you're going to see some great guests I have relationships with. We have Alex Witt, a Navy veteran from Battle Bars, that's going to be on here. And then we have the director of Camp Southern Ground. If you're not familiar with Camp Southern Ground, that's Zach Brown's camp that he has in Atlanta. So those are some of our early guests, and it's just going to get better. It's like I mentioned, we go Joe Rogan style. Sometimes this podcast is going to be 40 minutes. Sometimes it's going to be 2 hours.
Love it.
Because it's going to go where the conversation's taking us. And I am so happy and thrilled and passionate, because these episodes, I've already got them taped. And I'm just blown away by the conversations we're having. And I think you're going to be blown away too.
Undoubtedly. They're in the can, as they say, in the content, in the podcast space. Okay. So John Thompson, General Hanby, Alex Witt, and then Camp Southern Ground. I missed that guest.
So Lacey,
Lacey. Okay. Folks, I'm telling y'all, Tango Tango is going to be one of the preeminent, if not the number one, veteran-focused podcasts all around. And going back to that moniker, so folks in San Antonio, watch out. We're coming for your title too. What they call themselves, military city?
We're Military City USA, and we'll let them be Military City USA, because they got the bases. We don't have the bases.
That's true. All right.
We're going to be Veteran City USA.
There you go. And folks, y'all should know me by now. We love on San Antonio people and business leaders. And I spent 6 hot weeks in San Antonio way back in the day. You did too, Lloyd. Okay. So where are we going next? So folks, to wrap that up though, stay tuned. And Lloyd, in terms of podcast publishing frequency, is there any kind of initial expectation for our audience that you want to put out there? Is it going to be a couple times a month or so?
Yeah, it's funny. When we first started talking about this, I was like, wow, Scott, I'm really busy. I think we're only going to do one. and then I started taping these, and everybody started saying yes. And so then I told Amanda and Scott, let's do one every 2 weeks. And now I got 3 months in the can, right?
There we go.
So I'm thinking you're going to get a new one every 2 weeks, but maybe,
bonus
maybe every
episodes.
Week. So definitely, that's what we'll call them. We'll call them bonus episodes. So we'll have punch cards. If you tap 10 punch cards, you get a bonus episode.
Oh, I like it.
And then, hey, if you want to sponsor the show, we would love to get additional sponsors, and I think it will represent your brand well. and then we'll feature your brand in bonus episodes.
There you go. Love it, Lloyd. And I'll tell you, I am tickled at the opportunity to collaborate with you and build on, we stand on the shoulders of so many folks that have, served the community, whether they're creating content, and amplifying voices, or whether they're doing all sorts of different work, right? From getting veterans off the streets or taking care of their families, or helping their spouses get meaningful work, or you name it. There's so many different needs, but I am tickled to be able to collaborate with you, and I can't wait to hear these upcoming episodes. So, hey, we mentioned night work earlier, and I've got my copy. I should have brought it out, but it's back there somewhere. Tell us about what night work is and where folks can get it.
Sure. So night work is two things. So it was a book first, and then it's the name of my company. So I have a company that teaches the workshops for veterans and non-veterans. We have career finder workshops and career development workshops, but it started as a book. It was honestly a message from God. So when my wife passed away, 1 week I went I made a commitment to really take care of my friends, because my friends were there for me in that very difficult time. And 1 week I went to lunch with 3 different friends that aren't connected. All were believers, and all told me that week I needed to write a book. So it was crazy. And I was focused on my faith. I was renewing my faith, and I took that as a sign. Went and wrote 25 pages and sent it to the meanest author I know, Kevin Horgan, who's a Marine Corps veteran. He's mean, but he's squishy as well. And I thought he was going to punch me in the face and call me names and tell me to get back to work. And he said, "This is incredible. Keep going." So I wrote that book in 3 weeks. It's my different journeys. It's my journey to love with my late wife, my journey in the Air Force, my transition journey, my journey in corporate America, my Vetlanta journey, then the journey of my tragic loss, and then the journey in the faith. And I wrote that book in 3 weeks, which was crazy. And so it's out. There's not many copies left, because I'm getting ready to re-release it. I wrote it so quick, like the editing wasn't perfect. I have some run-on sentences and just some minor stuff that I want to clean up. So if it's not there on Amazon, give me 3 months and it's going to be available. So I sold enough to break even, and then I've given a lot of the books away. I would love to eventually make a profit off of it, but it was a labor so of love. Healing. Yeah, and it was, I have a bad memory, as I mentioned. It's hard for me to get through the schools because my memory's bad. When I started writing, I could not stop. I was writing to 10 o'clock in the morning, going to bed and waking up at 1 because an idea hit me, and getting up and writing. Wow. So it was incredible. It really helped me heal.
So folks, whether you're tuned in and watching us here, or maybe you're listening to this first episode of Tango Tango, you may want to take Lloyd up and maybe write your own book. I can only imagine some of the great stories that our audience members have, no matter what service that they were in, or maybe no matter who they supported that was serving, or what they've done from a business standpoint. But it can be very, as Lloyd is laying out, it can be massively therapeutic, even if it doesn't bring the bucks like Oprah. But yet, I bet Lloyd, this next one, we're going to see where this next one goes. I'm excited about it. So Night Work, you can check it out on Amazon. And if you can't find it there or other bookstores, just wait, because it sounds like the second edition is coming soon. Is that right, Lloyd?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So for Atlanta, what's coming up next for folks that get to Atlanta regularly? Atlanta does, I hear they've got a pretty busy airport. Of course, I'm kidding. It's the world's busiest. Everyone can get to Atlanta. Lloyd, if folks wanted to take you up on the cool things Vetlanta's doing, maybe attend one of these massive quarterly summits, what's the next big one coming up?
Yeah, so Vetlanta.org, go to the events page. So the next one coming up is May 7th. The theme for that one is going to be resilient leadership. We got an amazing keynote speaker, Ryan Henderson, who wrote Tip of the Spear. Take a look at his story. So want to get Ryan on the show, but he just did a 4-hour Sean Murphy podcast.
Really?
Yeah. And it's amazing. So I'm not sure what I could add to that. So he's going to be incredible. There's always incredible networking. A Q3 summit is going to be at the College Football Hall of Fame, and it's going to be sponsored by Ream. By the way, the May 7th summit I didn't mention is being hosted at UPS Global Headquarters.
Oh, cool.
So Q3 is sponsored by Ream at the College Football Hall of Fame, which if you haven't been to it, it's a great venue. And then Q4 is going to be almost right across the street from where I'm sitting at Cox.
Okay.
And so the Cox is a first-time host, so really looking forward to that. Getting some pretty high-level speakers to speak at the next three. So always a great time, always great for networking, and it's just pure our summits.
Yes. All right. So lots of reasons. So May 7th is the next one, folks. And there's so many reasons to come. It's free, I think, Lloyd, right?
Everything we do is free.
How about that, folks? So it's free to attend. If you've never checked out UPS headquarters, maybe you're a big supply chain nerd like me. That's yet one more reason number 1137 to come out. And you can meet Lloyd. You can meet, sounds like a great keynote, and Ryan Hendrickson. Is that right, Lloyd?
Yeah.
And all the other, I'm telling you, folks, the sense of community and the talent and the networking and what you'll leave with, you want to check out these quarterly summits. And, Atlanta's easy to get in and out of. So check out Vetlanta. You can learn more about all of this at vetlanta.org. Okay, Lloyd, my final question I've got for you before I share a couple words and then I pass the baton and we have the change of command. We don't have any flags to swap. We'll have to do that next time. Is with all the stuff you've got going on and all the passion and all the nudging of the mountains and outright moving of the mountains you do, how can folks track you down and break bread with you or you name it?
Shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'm highly responsive via LinkedIn. I've got this amazing network. You shoot me a response. Generally, I'm going to get back to you within an hour.
Oh, man, that's quite the guarantee. All right. So, folks, you're going to want to check out and connect with or follow Lloyd Knight on LinkedIn and let me know. Get back to me on this hour guarantee. We're gonna break out some
within business hours.
All right, good stuff. All right, so before I turn it over to the one and only Lloyd Knight, I want to first off all of our Veteran Voices listeners, viewers, supporters, audience members, whether you just follow us on social or you tune into all the podcasts or whatever you do, right? Big thanks. Big thanks. We couldn't have been here getting ready to launch this new chapter without you. And folks, I promise you, you're going to love Lloyd. You're going to love Tango Tango. And thank you for continuing to support our mission here. Big thanks to Dr. Mary Kate Saliva. I'm so proud and I'm so thankful for the previous seasons and all the great work she did. That's another reason we're here, right? Big thanks to Amanda and Laura and Joshua and Trisha and Donna and so many others that are going to fuel this next chapter and do so much work, and they never get any recognition, but they do great work. And with all of that said, first off, Supply Chain Now is very proud to support you and your mission, Lloyd, and is very proud to support all of our fellow veterans in so many different ways. And this is just the next version, next chapter of that. So, Mr. Lloyd Knight, I'm going to pass the baton to you, our new fearless leader, and would you take us home?
Yeah, great. It's such an honor. So thank you to all those people that you just mentioned. Thank you, Scott. I've always valued our friendship. I wish you lived closer. so we could spend more time together. So thank you, Scott, Amanda, and team. And I'm going to close out this podcast like I close out all my podcasts. Be safe, be kind, and be remarkable.
The Tango Tango podcast is proudly sponsored by Supply Chain Now. Join the Tango Tango community for more inspiring stories. Follow us on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to the Tango Tango YouTube channel and follow and listen to Tango Tango wherever you get your podcasts.